The screams echoed through the trees. I couldn't tell if they were human or animal. All I knew was they were loud, which meant they were close. As I listened to the high-pitched shrieks, it almost sounded like a couple of people having a shouting match. If I had been at my apartment in town, that's exactly what I would have thought the sound was. But then the pitch changed, and it took on a feral quality. I knew whoever or whatever was making the sound. I wanted nothing to do with them. Thinking you're alone in the wilderness is one thing. It gives a certain freeing feeling, like you're close to nature. But knowing you're alone and hearing the terrifying, nearly indescribable sound sent chills down my spine. I quickly questioned how much longer I would be alone, or alive. Did those things know I was here? Were they planning their attack, or was it just a gathering of something like a harmless chill session in the woods in the dead of night? Survival instinct was screaming for me to get out of there as quickly as possible. To hell with the tent and my supplies, just leave. For a brief moment, I nearly listened. Later, I would wish I had. Fortunately, I hadn't made a fire yet, and I decided against one now. If by some miracle those things didn't know I was here, my fire would draw them in like flies to, well, something I didn't want to be in. Even though the screaming was still going at a fever pitch, I quietly snuck into my tent and zipped it shut, as if some flimsy material would magically keep at bay whatever beasts were raging out there. Searching through my pack, I found my Swiss Army knife and kept it firm in my grasp as I lay down on my sleeping bag. I didn't dare settle in for the night. Sleeping through being attacked by wild whatevers, torn to shreds, can be bad for my health. As I lay there, eyes wide, listening to the horrible shrieks that seemed to come from everywhere, they suddenly stopped. At first, this was a relief, but when the sound stopped, so did all the other noises of the forest. It was as if someone had hit the mute button on all of nature. I heard a loud thumping sound that sounded like drums beating faster and faster, until I realized it was my heart. Trying to calm myself so I didn't have a heart attack on the spot was a challenge. I tried to think of calm blue oceans and sunrises, of beautiful things that had nothing to do with the situation I was in. Apparently, I did my job too well. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up in a panic. Jumping up, I looked all around for the beasts that were coming to get me. When all that stared back at me were the contents of my backpack and the four walls of the tent, I allowed myself to take a few deep breaths. It was morning, and the sun was up, and the birds were singing. I took both of those as good signs. Being alive was a bonus as well. It was decision time. Do I pack up and cut my trip short by 2 days, or do I write off last night's incident as a rare occurrence and not worry about it today in the daylight as the sun's rays bathed me in warmth? It's funny how fear manifests itself so much stronger at night. Last night, the forest seemed like the most horrifying place I'd ever been. Today, it looks like all the beauty of nature is spread out before me, and I couldn't imagine anything bad happening in such a picturesque place. As I looked out over the clearing in the woods, I saw a large dark spot that was moving towards me. I dove into my tent and emerged with a pair of binoculars. Peering through them, I saw the spot was a bear, and it was headed my way. So much for nothing bad happening in nature. My plan of action was to hide and hope it went away, turn down another path before it got here. That plan didn't work out so well. Within 15 minutes, I could hear it snuffling around the campsite, looking for something to eat. I hoped it wouldn't be eating fresh camper. The can of bear spray was firmly in my hand, with white knuckles clenching it. Having it was one thing. using it was another, and that was my last resort. Spray and run. The sniffing got louder, and I could see the bottom of the edges of the tent being pushed in by a large nose. My knuckles grew a little wider as I followed its progress along the edge and around the tent, and then there was a pause. The dreadful pause. The kind of pause that horrible decisions are born from. I was contemplating my own horrible decision when the sniffing started again, and this time leading away from the tent. Breathing a cautiously optimistic sigh of relief, I opened the tent flap, just enough to see the bear lumbering off into the woods. Again, I held a silent vote, just like the song said. Should I stay or should I go? I'd only been camping up here once before, but I didn't remember it being this dangerous. Maybe I just got lucky last time. Not wanting my luck to run out, I packed up my tent and got ready to leave. The sun was already high in the sky, leaving me just a few hours to hike out of what took me a full day to hike in. I looked for bear tracks to see which way it had left, but the ground was so dry there was nothing to see. Crossing my fingers, I headed out on the trail, hoping that it had gone some other way. It was easy going, making the terror of last night fade even more. I still kept a wary eye for the bear, though. No use in getting so caught up in nature that I ignore her dangers. After an hour of walking, I found a large rock on the side of the trail and decided to take a break. Pulling out a granola bar and a bottle of water, I looked around as I snacked. There was a clearing in the woods and a rough path leading to it. It wasn't any official path, just one that happens when a lot of feet go the same way and tramp down the foliage. There was a faint whiff of smoke coming from the clearing, but I couldn't see exactly what was causing it. My curiosity wanted to see what was there, but my common sense said no way. In the end, curiosity fought dirty, said the smoke meant that there had been a fire, and the ashes could blow into the trees if the wind picked up and cause a wildfire. It was a good point, even though the wind was uncannily still at the moment. I took a quick look around to make sure the bear wasn't sneaking up on me, and then started down the narrow path. The trees blocked out some of the light as I headed down the path toward the clearing, making me literally descend into darkness. It wasn't a good feeling. My eyes darted around looking for anything out of the ordinary, and I slowed my pace. Then suddenly the trees opened up, and daylight shone brightly on the clearing, and then the remnants of the fire, with a wisp of smoke still rising. Whoever had made it had been dangerously uncaring about the safety of the woods. The fire sat right in the middle of a patch of grass, with no ring of stone surrounding it. My ire rose at the carelessness of this person. I found myself wishing very bad things on them, when I noticed something else. There were splotches of red all around the fire. It was like someone had spilled red paint all around. It was strange. Why would someone bring paint out here to the middle of the woods? I stalked around the other side of the fire looking for the answer to this mystery. Unfortunately, I found it. There was something pale sitting outside the burnt grass of the fire. It was next to a splotch of red. I bent down and moved the grass to see more clearly. Picking it up, I saw it was a severed human toe. I dropped it and stood up like a shot. The red splotches made sense to me now. They weren't paint, and they were blood. A chill ran down my spine. I suddenly felt very alone, surrounded. My eyes darted all around the clearing and into the trees as I did a slow circle, searching for whatever was about to attack. As I searched, I saw the red splotches led off into the woods in the opposite direction of the trail. Curiosity tried to get me to follow, but I told it to shut the hell up, and I hightailed it out of there, my head on a swivel, searching for threats. Just as I was about to reach the main trail, I literally ran into the bear. I'd been so busy watching behind me for whatever might be chasing me that I didn't see what was in front of me. It turned to face me, showing its red teeth, and then it stood on its hind legs, dwarfing me, and roared. I wished I'd worn the brown pants, because I soiled myself in fear, and I was so terrified I didn't move, and I couldn't. I was paralyzed. It dropped back down onto its front legs and approached me, with teeth bared. I knew right then it was responsible for the screams and the dismembered toe. The only thing I couldn't figure out was the fire. I'd never heard of bears being able to start a fire. This was unfortunately the last thought going through my head before being eaten. It sniffed, took a step back. If I'd known dropping a load in my pants would save me, I would have done it last night. As I looked into the eyes of my death, it wasn't looking back at me. It was looking past me. I wasn't sure what kind of trick this bear was pulling. It wasn't like it had to fool me or anything. It had me dead to rights. Curiosity made me turn and follow the bear's gaze. I instantly regretted it. Standing near the clearing was a monster. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It stood on hind legs at least 8 feet tall. It had the horns of a deer, but the face looked like a deer skull with no skin on it. Its shoulders were covered in what looked like a cloak made of another animal's skin. The bear let out a deep growl of menace. I took the opportunity to back away and allow the bear a clear path to its adversary. He glanced at me for a moment and then started toward the monster. As soon as it was past me, I dropped my pack and ran down the trail with every ounce of speed I could muster. It didn't matter that my car was miles away. It didn't matter that there was no way I could sprint all the way there without collapsing and having a heart attack. Just then I heard the fight. A growling, roaring, slashing, knocking trees down fight that would have been awesome to watch from inside a bunker with 2-foot thick concrete walls. Just me alone, without a rocket launcher to defend myself. There was no way I was sticking around. I ran for a solid 10 minutes, before the stitch in my side told me I had to at least slow to a walk. I didn't dare stop. I knew I had to keep moving. It was my only chance of surviving by some miracle. The sounds of the fight echoed throughout the trees, making it seem surreal to hear it, then hear it echo back again. It sounded like the fight was slowing down. I hoped it would last for a while longer. Maybe whichever one would forget about me or be too tired to track me down. My walk had become a limp. I was nearly out of energy and had a mile to go to the relative safety of my car. Surely by now I could take it easy. As the thought rolled through my brain, the sounds of the fight ceased. The fading echo was all that remained. I wondered which one had been victorious, and comforted myself that the victor was surely enjoying the spoils by feasting on the fallen adversary. But in the back of my mind, unease grew. What if he didn't forget me? And what if it was following me right now? I found myself walking a little faster, much to the pain and chagrin of my legs. The silence that fell in the aftermath of the fight was disconcerting. The animals around me that had been chattering away, suddenly falling silent, was alarming. I started jogging. Each step a new exercise in pain. There was no doubt I was being followed. The footsteps behind me were getting louder by the moment. My car was in sight. I was almost free. The footsteps behind me were very loud now. I knew it was right behind me, but I didn't dare look back. Run. Don't think, just run. My thoughts screamed at me. Even my curiosity had no desire to look back. 10 steps from the car, I dug in my pocket looking for my keys. And for a brief, terrifying moment, I couldn't find them. And then I dug a little deeper and came away with my prize. I hit the remote to unlock the car and dove into the driver's seat. The engine had just roared to life when the monster appeared. I threw the car into reverse and stomped on the gas, whipping around and making the monster miss, crushing through the windshield. I jammed it into drive and floored it as the monster recovered, started after me. For a long, horrid moment, it seemed to be catching up to me. The road was gravel and had several potholes in it. I found myself swerving to miss the biggest ones so my car wouldn't bottom out, but by doing so, the monster gained ground. It was almost within reach of my rear bumper when I slid sideways onto the main road. Once on the pavement, I floored it and watched with satisfaction as the monster fell behind. I breathed a sigh of relief as I relaxed and settled in for the ride home. It wasn't long until I was pulling into my driveway and parking. My head fell back against the headrest, and I was tempted to take a nap right there when my nose reminded me of the state of my pants. Walking in empty-handed was a mixed blessing. I'd left hundreds of dollars in equipment behind, but at least I was alive. My shower called to me. I stripped, threw my pants and underwear in the trash, and settled into the longest, most rewarding shower of my life. After drying, I threw on a Metallica t-shirt and a pair of shorts. I came back out to the living room and settled in to watch a movie. Horror was out. I knew I'd have nightmares for a week about my ordeal. I decided to watch an episode of Wipeout. 3 episodes later, I found my eyelids fighting gravity and exhaustion. Heading to bed, I turned out the lights and stepped up to the living room window. Looking out over the lights of the town, I sighed, seeing the trees of the park far in the distance, and knowing I'd never visit there again. Before I turned toward my bedroom, something caught my eye. It was impossible. I rubbed my eyes to be sure. The monster was creeping out of the woods and coming straight toward my house. As I watched it, it looked up and saw me. Our eyes locked, mine full of fear, its full of menace. I ran through the house, making sure every door and window was locked. After that, I went to my bedstand and pulled out my snub-nosed .38, checking to make sure it was loaded, grabbing a handful of extra bullets, and shoving them in my pocket. Running back out to the living room, I looked out against the window, but it was gone. And pressing my face against the glass, I searched the front yard, but it wasn't there. For an instant, I wondered if my imagination had been playing tricks on me. I went to the kitchen window and looked into the backyard. It was dark. I couldn't see much. And reaching for the light switch, I hesitated, not wanting to see it suddenly appear in front of me. But I had to know if this thing was real or not. I'd rather that I was going crazy than ever see that thing again. Flicking on the light, I took a half step back. Nothing was there. I scanned the entire backyard, all the way to the woods that bordered my property. Nothing. I shrugged and was about to go to bed when I heard it. My foot stopped on the first step, and I turned back toward the door. Someone or something was scraping against the front door. Feeling like I was in a trance, I was drawn to the door. Leaning up to the peephole, I closed my eyes and breathed a silent prayer that nothing would be there. My prayers were answered, and there was nothing out there. As tempted as I was to just accept this audible hallucination, my shaking hand reached for the doorknob. The distance between my hand and the door seemed to fade, like one of those scenes in a horror movie where the camera zooms in while going backward. I turned the knob and held my breath while opening the door. Nothing was there. I released a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Looking around, the yard was empty, just the evening mist clinging to the lawn. My imagination had gotten the best of me, and I turned to go back inside and saw the door and the door frame had long scratches on it. My blood froze. It was real. It was here. It had tracked me down. As terror gripped me, I saw a flash of brown fur an instant before it charged me. In sheer desperation, I fell back into the door just as it hit the doorframe. Its antlers slammed into the doorframe, sending splinters flying as it struggled to get loose from the destroyed wood. I lay on the door, watching in grim fascination, stunned by the fact that it had missed gouging my eyes by a mere fraction of an inch. The doorway had saved me. The same doorway that was rapidly disappearing under the monster's onslaught. I regained myself and ran. As I darted through the living room, somehow I had the presence of mind to grab the house phone and dial 911 as I headed down the basement steps, slamming the door behind me.
911, what's your emergency?
Came the lady operator's voice. I'm being chased by a monster who's trying to kill me, I said, vaulting down the stairs.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I'm being chased by a monster who's trying to kill me.
Are you talking about a person?
No. What do you not understand about the word monster?
All right. It's my duty to inform you that prank calls will be reported to the police, and you could face charges.
Fine. Send the cops. Maybe they can fight off the monster long enough to put me in cuffs. The line disconnected. Son of a... I said as I heard the monster stalking around inside the house. I squeezed myself into the far corner between the wall and the oil tank as I tried to be as quiet as possible. Barely breathing, I listened to its measured steps as it crept from room to room. The floorboards complained with loud creaks, telling me this thing weighed considerably more than me. I heard it turn toward the stairs and thought about making a run for the cellar door that led outside when my phone rang. Hello? I whisper-screamed, trying to be as quiet as possible.
Is this the person who just called 911 about a monster?
Yes, who is this? There was a pause as I heard the footsteps change direction.
I'm from another agency. Could you describe the monster for me?
So you're one of those 3-letter agencies that always say they don't spy on our phone calls?
Could you describe the monster for me?
It's huge, at least 8 feet tall, covered in fur, wearing the fur of another animal over its shoulders. Oh, and it has antlers like a deer. I heard a sharp intake of air.
Where is it?
And I gave him my address.
I meant, where is it in the house?
It's on the first floor and I'm in the basement, but I think it's coming down here. Just then I heard the basement door open. Gotta go, I whispered, and then hung up the phone. The basement stairs groaned under the weight, and I hoped that the wood would collapse under the weight. It would fall, snapping its neck. No such luck. The stairs creaked as it continued to the bottom. I had to duck in this basement, so I was sure it was on all fours to keep from getting tangled in the rafters. My heart pounded, and I struggled to keep my breathing quiet so I wouldn't give away my position. The chuffing of the monster's breathing was getting closer. I wanted to close my eyes, but I had to know when it came close enough. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gun. Aiming it at the corner, I waited. The skeletal snout appeared first, but I didn't shoot, and the shot would just bounce off a bone. I wanted to hit something more vital and hoped that I might somehow survive. The rest of the bony skull made its appearance and went by without noticing me. Next came the neck and the rest of the body. I wasn't sure where this thing's vital organs were, and so I held off, hoping that it might not notice me at all. Those hopes were dashed when it sniffed and then whipped around and stared right at me. I took that as a sign to shoot it in the chest. The gunshot was deafening, especially in such a closed space. My ears were ringing so loud I could barely hear the monster screaming and tearing into my oil tank limb from limb and trying to get to me. I fired again, trying to hit any part of its body as oil flew from its thrashing around. We were both covered in heating oil, and yet it still kept coming. 3 more shots didn't even slow it down. It was so close, the muzzle of the gun was nearly touching it. I shoved the barrel into one of its eye sockets and pulled the trigger. The flame from the exploding gunpowder set the oil on fire. I don't know if it was that or the bullet bouncing around in its skull that made it shriek even louder. Flame engulfed its screaming form, making it look like a demon straight from hell. It ran out of the basement, through the outside doors, bursting out into the open air and disappearing into the night. I was so relieved I didn't notice right away that I was on fire. The oil had splashed on me and had ignited when the monster caught fire. I tried to push my way out quickly, but the monster had shoved the tank closer to the wall, pinning me. The fire devoured the oil on my clothes and my bare skin, making me scream in agony as I tried in vain to get away from the fire. This was it. I would die this horrible, agonizing death, trapped in an inferno, and the monster would get its revenge and not even know it. Maybe once it extinguished its own fire, it would come back and devour what was left of me, like a well-done steak. I must have been hallucinating, and I could have sworn a cloud enveloped me just before I died. I woke in a white room with an annoying beeping sound that wouldn't stop. And there was a smiling face sitting in the corner staring back at me, attached to a man I'd never met.
How are you feeling?
He said, stepping over to the hospital bed. Am I dead? I rasped.
Not yet. It was close, though. If we hadn't gotten to you when we did, you would have been a shish kebab.
I tried to lean up, but the pain put me back in the bed.
Yeah, you're not going to be taking any hiking trips for a while. You've got burns all over your legs that'll need some time to heal.
I'm never going hiking again. Are you the guy I talked to on the phone?
Yeah. Do you mind telling me the rest of what happened?
He said, pulling out a pen and a notepad. Sure, I said, shrugging. And since you saved my life, it's the least I could do. He pulled his chair over and got comfortable. What happened to the monster, anyway? He hesitated. It got away, didn't it?
Yeah,
he said, lowering his head a little.
We lost the trail after it extinguished itself, but don't worry, we'll find it.
I didn't comment on my opinion of the competency of the government agencies out of respect for the man who saved my life, but suffice it to say, I wouldn't be sleeping very deeply once I got back home. Where would you like me to start?
The beginning is always a good place.
A week later, I walked out of the hospital. Literally. The doctor said I'd been very lucky. Because I'd been sweating, the oil didn't stick to my skin. And since oil and water don't mix, it was literally floating on top of the sweat on my legs. Even though I did receive some burns, they weren't nearly as bad as they could have been. I guess I'm just one lucky guy. Now I get to go home and barricade myself in my house, hoping that thing forgets about me, or better yet, that it had died from its burn injuries. When I got home, I walked up to the front door and saw the scratches on it. I took the steps one at a time, looking at the door frame where it had gotten stuck, trying to gouge my eyes out. I opened the door slowly, as if expecting it to be waiting behind the door to nab me and drag me off into the forest to do unspeakable things to me. I released my white knuckles from the doorknob and then quickly shut and locked the door. Splinters and sawdust covered the carpet, along with muddy, inhuman footprints. After doing a quick walkthrough of the house to make sure it wasn't there, I grabbed the vacuum and started cleaning. I had just finished when a knock at my door nearly sent me through the ceiling. Peeking out through the peephole, I saw the man who had saved me that night and opened the door. "What are you doing here?"
I came to check on you. Mind if I come in?
I stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. And he stepped in and scoped out the room.
It's surprisingly clean for having a wendigo nearly destroy it.
"I just got done vacuuming." He eyed me up and down.
Of course you did,
he said, flopping into a comfortable chair. "So, how goes the hunt?" I said, sitting in my usual chair. He shifted in his seat.
It's going well.
"So you've captured it then?"
Not exactly.
"Killed it?" He shook his head. "Then what have you done?"
I saved your life.
"And I thank you. What have you done lately?"
Well, that's kind of what I'm here for. How would you like to join our team?
"Team of what?"
Cryptid hunters.
I looked at him with sheer disbelief. "Pass."
You haven't even heard.
"I don't want anything to do with that thing," I said, walking into the kitchen.
But you're the only one who's ever survived an attack.
I wondered to myself if that was true, or if he was just trying to make my pride force me into a bad decision. "Pass."
You wouldn't be going alone,
he said, getting up and following me to the kitchen.
There's 2 other cryptid hunters that would be along, plus me.
"Not interested."
There's a reward for its capture. You'd get a share of it.
"No deal," I said, starting up the stairs. He seemed flustered and grasping at straws.
You'd get to carry a big gun.
I paused halfway up the stairs. "How big of a gun?"
Big.
I thought about it for a long moment. "All right," I said, then continued up the stairs.
Great, then let's go.
I paused. "What do you mean, let's go? Like, right now? I just got home."
You need to strike while the trail is fresh.
"Fresh? A week old is fresh?" He shrugged.
The guys and your equipment are in the truck.
"Can I at least grab a shower first?" There was an odd look in his eye.
No need. We'll be out on the trail.
He stood in silent stare down for a long moment. Then I shrugged and came back down the steps. "So, how much money will I be making?" He smiled.
Enough.
I followed him outside, turning at the last moment to lock my front door that had seen better days and looked like a stiff breeze would blow it over. He grinned, but said nothing as we approached the truck and climbed in the back doors. The 2 men in front merely nodded when we got in. Then the driver started the truck and drove away towards the woods. I wasn't having pleasant memories flash back when we pulled into the same trailhead I had barely escaped from just over a week ago. I had to wonder if I had some head trauma they had noticed at the hospital, or if Mr. 3-letter government agency had drugged me without my knowledge to get me to come back here. I was tempted to run as soon as I opened the door, but I didn't want to look like a coward in front of these guys. Even though I didn't know them from Adam, they each had a good 50 pounds of pure muscle on me. We stepped around to the back, and Mr. 3 handed me a backpack that was so heavy it nearly pulled me over.
You gonna be good with that?
He said, noticing my struggle.
You can take some stuff out if you want.
"Nope, I'm good," I said, hefting it onto my back and somehow managing to keep it there without my knees buckling under the weight. Next, he handed me a belt that had all kinds of stuff on it, including a big gun. It was a revolver, but the cylinder was so long I wondered if it would shoot rifle shells.
Just remember, we're trying to capture it, not kill it.
That was never part of the deal.
It is if you want the big payday.
I stopped in front of him. What if I want revenge? He looked me up and down, sizing me up as if seeing me for the first time.
Then you should go home and leave the hunting to us,
he said, then stepped around me and started down the trail. The second hunter followed him, but the third stayed behind and stared at me. Aren't you following them?
I'm the rear guard. I go last. Watch everybody else's back.
So you're waiting to see if I follow them or tuck my tail between my legs and slink home?
Pretty much, yeah.
I looked from the trail to the road and back again, then slumped my shoulders and started down the trail. So, what do I call you? I said over my shoulder to the hunter behind me. He was silent for a moment, and then softly said,
You can call me Ray.
My mind shot back to an old comedy routine I'd seen on one of those classic TV shows. Alright, Ray, I guess it's going to be you and me for a while because I know I won't be catching up to them with what feels like a Buick strapped to my back.
He told you could take out whatever you felt you didn't need.
Ever heard of this thing called pride, Ray? He shook his head ruefully.
Unfortunately, yes. Does that mean I can count on you to continue to make stupid decisions?
I stopped and turned on him. I think the answer is obvious.
Great,
he said, with no small amount of sarcasm. We started down the trail, and I must say, I did pretty well for around half an hour. And when I say pretty well, I mean trudging, heaving, moaning at the incredible amount of weight on my back as we slowly followed the trail through the forest. To make things worse, it started to drizzle. It didn't take too long for him to have had enough.
Enough. Just stop right there.
I obeyed and nearly fell over backward as gravity grabbed the backpack and tried to hurl it to the ground. If it wouldn't have been for Ray catching me, I would have hit the ground hard and rolled around like a helpless turtle, unable to get up on my own. He lifted the pack off my back effortlessly and set it on the ground. He dug through it, started thrusting things toward me.
Here,
he said, shoving a handful of granola bars towards me.
Put these in your pants pockets.
Next, he handed me a flashlight, some extra rounds of ammo, a water bottle, and a rain poncho. I took the poncho out of its wrapper and put it on. The first steps I took sounded like I was wearing a snowsuit, and everything he'd given me to stow in my pockets made some kind of noise. The granola bar wrappers rubbed together, the rounds of ammo clinked and clinked, and even the rain poncho made noise when I took a step. I thought we were trying to sneak up on this thing, and I said, stopping in my tracks. I sound like a freaking one-man band.
Don't worry about it,
he said, avoiding my eyes as he set the pack off to the side of the trail and stepped past me.
I'm sure the rain will cover your sounds.
I looked up and only a few drops landed on my cheeks. The rest was just a fine mist. Narrowing my eyes, I watched as Ray walked ahead of me on the trail. I hadn't known him long, but it was easy to see he was hiding something. Maybe he didn't want to scare me, so I would keep on with the search. In any case, I rested my hand on the gun in its holster for comfort.
Don't go pulling that out unless you have to,
he said, without looking back.
Remember, we're here to capture, not kill.
Maybe you are.
He stopped dead in his tracks and turned towards me.
Look, I get it. You're scared. I would be too if this was the first time I was hunting something like this. But you have to do things our way so no one gets hurt. Understand?
He hadn't said it in a threatening way, just matter of fact. But I still found myself taking a step back. What if that thing decides it wants to hurt someone? He looked me in the eyes.
And we stop it,
he said, and then turned and started down the trail, not even checking to see if I was following. I sighed and fell in step behind him. finding it much easier now without the heavy pack of doom weighing me down. I still rested my hand on the gun as we walked. The forest was quiet, and the animals weren't making much sound, and the wind was still. I didn't know if it was the intensifying rain or something else that seemed to spook them. "Ray," I heard someone whisper. He stopped and whipped around on me.
What?
He said, looking at me. I didn't say anything. His eyes were full of suspicion, but he continued along the trail. It wasn't long until we heard the sound again. "Ray." His eyes instantly shot to me, but I held up my hands in surrender and shook my head. He scanned the trees, looking for where the voice had come from when we heard it again. This time he was able to focus in on where it had come from. He started toward it without a second glance at me. "Wait a minute. Are you sure you want to follow this?"
Of course,
he said, but his eyes had an otherworldly quality to them, like he had been hypnotized, or somehow was under the voice's spell. He stepped forward slowly, but not carefully. It was as if he were being drawn, and started walking into the woods in front of me. He had almost disappeared when suddenly a creature appeared as huge and as real as ever. Its skin was burned all over its body, hanging loosely in some places like it was about to fall off. It was much more terrifying than the last time I'd seen it. Even the hide of the other animal that it had wore as a shawl seemed to melt to its shoulders. It slashed Ray across the throat in one lightning flash motion. All I saw was a spray of red before the creature picked Ray up and started off into the woods. Before I knew what was happening, my gun was in my hand. I was firing it over and over at the beast as it escaped with its prize. I fired the gun empty, but kept squeezing the trigger on empty cylinders. Finally, I realized I wasn't shooting anymore and emptied the shell casings out, digging in my pocket to reload and dropping bullets in my haste. Once I finally had it reloaded, I slammed the cylinder shut and looked for the creature. To my surprise, 2 trees came toward me. I aimed the shaking gun toward them when one of them said,
"Stop! Don't shoot us!"
It was so shocking to hear tree talk that I obeyed its command. They continued to advance on me when they stopped a few feet away. One of them ripped its top off, revealing a human head. It was the agent.
"Give me that gun,"
he said with an outstretched branch. "Absolutely not," I said, holding it away from him like a kid withholding a toy from a parent. "Where have you 2 been?" The other agent removed his treetop as well.
"We were staking out the area. You 2 were supposed to bring it to us so we could capture it."
"Bring it to you? How were we supposed to do that?" He stared at me for a long time, looking as though he was unsure of what to say. I finally got it. "You used me as bait. You knew once that thing got my scent it would follow me." And he shrugged.
"It was as good a plan as any."
"Except it caught on to your little plan. Now Ray is in harm's way. Could already be dead."
"What do you mean, dead?"
I described him being taken with a special emphasis on the blood spray. And he stared at me silently.
"We need to regroup and think what our next tactic is."
"Our next tactic is to find this thing and put as many holes in it as possible before it has Ray for an afternoon snack," I said, holding up the gun for emphasis.
"I told you, we're bringing it in alive."
"Even at the cost of our lives?" I said, looking from one agent to the other. My point seemed to sink in, grudgingly, with both of them.
"We still need to find it. After we find it, we can debate killing it or not."
"Fine, this way," I said, starting in the same direction I'd seen the creature and Ray disappear.
"Who died and made you boss?"
He said, following as quickly as the tree outfit would let him. I turned and faced him, serious as a heart attack. "Hopefully not Ray," I said, and then turned and resumed in the direction I'd seen them. I didn't turn back to see if they were following, but I could hear trees rustling behind me. I hoped that was them, or I was in trouble. As we walked, my senses were on alert, watching and listening for the creature in hopes that it wouldn't pull another sneak attack. Thinking back to the brief battle, I wondered how many of my 6 shots hit the beast and how many might have hit Ray. I couldn't be that careless in the upcoming fight. I would have to take better aim and be patient. Not only was there Ray to think of as a potential victim, but also the 2 clowns behind me, dressed up as trees. We weren't on any trail, and that made it rough going for me. My legs were still sensitive, and I had rushed out of the house in just a pair of shorts and a Metallica t-shirt. The rain poncho I wore gave me a little warmth, but not as much as I would have liked. When we left, it was nice out, with the temperature in the mid-70s, but once the rain started, it dropped 10 degrees. That, plus the fact that we were walking through rough country, avoiding jaggers, thorns, and all kinds of plants that seemed like they were designed just for the annoyance factor. I can't imagine how those 2 behind me were doing in those ridiculous tree outfits. I turned to check on them, but they were gone. Slowly looking around the forest, I searched for them, but they were nowhere to be found. With their outfits on, they could have been right beside me and I wouldn't know it. They also admitted to using me as bait. Maybe that's what they were doing again. I wish I would have stayed home and ordered a pizza and watched Wipeout on TV, then fallen asleep on the couch. That would have been a good first day home from the hospital. Instead, I was freezing in the middle of the woods, all alone. Now that I looked around, I lost which direction I was going. So, now I was officially lost in the woods. Great. The rain was coming down harder now. I decided to look for some kind of shelter, regroup. I walked forward, looking not for the creature, but anything I could use to hide from the rain. A cave would be great, as long as nothing was in it. A fallen tree that I could sit under would do as well. In the end, I lucked out, and I hadn't gone far when a cave appeared up ahead. Instead of blundering inside, I circled around and watched the entrance for a while, until I was cold enough to ignore the potential danger and get out of the rain. Standing in the mouth of the cave helped a little by getting me out of the rain, but I was still freezing. I turned and looked inside. The huge maw of blackness stared back out. Even using my flashlight didn't tell me much about my impromptu rest stop. Hanging out near the entrance was not advised. I would have to find something else once the rain stopped. But as I looked up at a flash of light, followed soon by a crash of thunder that made the world shake, told me the rain wasn't about to let up. As cold as I was, it would take a special kind of crazy to go exploring this cave that could hold any number of wild animals who had no problem eating humans. I hoped one of them wouldn't be the creature. What did the agent call it? Wendigo? Against every survival instinct, I shone my light into the cave and started walking. It was big, at least 12 feet from the ceiling, but the walls were smooth, almost like it had been dug with a machine. There weren't a lot of rocks and debris like you would envision in a cave. It seemed like someone had made this cave and concealed it as natural. But why? There was nothing out here in the middle of the woods. Even the cave itself was far off the beaten path. As I was wondering about the nature of the cave, I heard a sound behind me. Slowly I turned, hoping that the creature hadn't snuck up behind me like it did with Ray. All I saw was 2 trees, standing on either side of the cave. You've got to be kidding me. Like, no one's going to notice 2 trees suddenly growing in the middle of a cave with no sunlight? Neither tree moved, but I was sure one of them made a shushing sound. I shook my head and continued into the cave. The further I went, the more the flashlight struggled to ward off the dark. It was like the light was overwhelmed by the darkness. As big as the cave was, I came to a spot where it opened into a larger room. The ceiling was so far up, it was hard for the flashlight to reach. As I scanned around the room with the light, I settled on something over in the corner. The closer I got to it, the more I wanted to turn around and leave. I stepped up right beside it and pulled my shirt collar up over my nose to cover the stench of death and decay. It was Ray, or what was left of him, strung up on a rack. Both of his legs were gone, and the huge puddle of blood under him didn't give me hope that he had survived. I reached up and felt for a pulse anyway. My hand went right into the opening where the creature had slashed his neck, and there was no pulse. At least I didn't see any bullet holes in him. That made me feel a little better. I hung my head and turned to report to the trees following me when I saw a sight that made me question reality. The creature had returned. It was in a life and death battle with a tree. It had picked the tree up and was holding it near the top. The tree was kicking and punching the creature as though its life depended on it. The creature seemed confused at first, but once the tree had delivered a well-placed kick, the creature seemed to decide that it had had enough. It swung the tree around effortlessly like a baseball bat and smashed it into a wall. The sickening crunching sound it made on impact were a combination of wood and bone breaking. The tree instantly went limp, but the creature wanted to make sure. It threw the tree at the other wall, leaving a red splotch on impact before collapsing to the ground. The second tree hadn't moved the entire time. The creature stepped close to it, suddenly suspicious. It reached out when I made my decision to act. I pulled out the gun, aimed at the creature's head, and squeezed the trigger. I'd never fired a .44 Magnum in a cave before, and I never will again. My ears were ringing so bad I couldn't hear anything. I saw the tree holding its ears, as well as the wendigo. Its mouth was open, and I imagined it was screaming, but I couldn't hear it. I don't know what happened, if something in me just snapped, or I realized I was about to end up like Ray. I ran up to the wendigo while it was disoriented by the gunshot, stuck the gun under its chin near its neck, and squeezed the trigger 5 more times. The top of its head exploded with a geyser of bone and blood. It screamed so loud I even heard it through my hopefully temporary deafness. I didn't hang around to see what was going to happen. I ran towards the cave entrance, grabbing the uninjured tree and pulling him out with me. It only took a moment for the tree to get the point and run along. Once out, he guided me back to the trail and took the top of his tree disguise off to talk to me.
I told you I wanted that thing alive,
he said, looking and sounding very unhappy. Why don't you tell Ray and the other agent you just lost how that thing's life was more important than theirs? He glared at me. Don't give me that look. I just shot a wendigo at point-blank range. You think your little glare is going to frighten me? He continued to glare. Okay, you have 2 choices here. Either drive me home or give me your keys. He finally allowed his shoulders to relax and started walking.
I'm not giving you the keys to my car.
We walked back out in silence. Whatever his deal was with bringing the creature in alive, he was serious about it. I was just glad the whole ordeal was over. Do you think it's dead? He ignored me for a few minutes and finally said,
I don't know. I've heard some amazing stories about how they recuperate.
Wow, gee thanks. I feel so much safer now, I said as we rounded a corner. And there, standing in the middle of the trail, was a huge bear. We both froze. What do we do?
Shut up,
We stood as still as humanly possible, and as the bear sniffed the air and lumbered up to us, for some reason, it looked familiar. Could it possibly be the same bear that fought the wendigo over a week ago? It had some scars and scratch marks on it that looked partially healed. It stepped up to the agent and stared at him. Perhaps it had never seen a tree partially eat a human before. That's what he looked like with the top of the outfit off. Like the tree had half digested a human the way a snake devours its prey. Then it stepped over and sniffed me. Its eyes grew wide with what I would almost call fear. But that couldn't be, right? Could it? I mean, why would a bear be afraid of me? It turned tail and ran off into the woods without looking back. What was that about?
Do you really want to question it, or just get out of here?
Get out of here, I said, my feet already double timing it down the trail. We were within sight of the car before we slowed down. Both of us were breathing hard from the power walking the whole way. I was sure it couldn't have been easy for him in that tree suit.
I think I may have figured it out,
he said as we arrived at the car and he fished out his keys. Do tell, O wise one.
It smelled the wendigo's blood on you.
What difference does that make?
Think about it. If you're enough of a badass to have wendigo blood on you, the bear probably didn't want to mess with you.
I thought about it, and it made sense in a way. Just as we were about to leave, we heard an inhuman shriek off in the distance. He turned to me with a gleam in his eyes. Oh no, you take me home right now. Then I don't care if you try to go hunt this thing down and end up getting eaten.
Oh, all right,
he said, pouting. We drove in silence, each of us in our own world of thoughts. Every once in a while, I couldn't help glancing in the rearview mirror, just to be sure. When we arrived at my house, I got out and turned to leave, then stopped. Why was that cave man-made?
What makes you think it was man-made?
He said with a nervous chuckle. The walls and ceilings were too smooth.
They seemed rough enough to me.
So you're not going to tell me that there was a secret military base nearby?
You enjoy your recuperation, sir,
he said, handing me a business card.
If you ever have any problems like this again, give me a call.
I dropped the card on the seat. I think I'd be better off on my own. You don't protect your partners very well. I walked inside my house without looking back.